This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry with agriculture broadcasters Orion Samuelson and Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH and your local Case IH dealer.
Winter is farm meeting season, and farm meetings are getting underway with a big one just a few weeks from now. Hello, folks. Welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio, and as the new year comes into focus, it's time for a lot of growers to get together off their farms and share ideas and learn a little bit more about their industry. One of the great places to do that is with the Farm Futures Business Summit. Joining me this weekend is Mike Wilson, the executive editor of Farm Futures magazine. And Mike, looking at the Business Summit this year, your theme is unlocking your competitive advantage. Tell us, why is that important in 2022?
Well, thanks, Mike. We're looking at a lot of different challenges coming up this year, as everybody knows, in farming. Who knows what kind of black swans are going to be thrown at us in the coming 12 months. Unlock your competitive advantage is all about taking a look and self-assessing your business skills and trying to do some things to improve your business and make sure that you are working as best you can in terms of managing the risk that comes with your business. And we feel like the place to start are these two events. First is the Farm Futures Ag Finance Boot Camp, and the second is the Farm Futures Business Summit. That's the 19th and then the 20th and 21st.
Let's talk about the boot camp first. Mike, who do you have coming this year?
Well, we have some former ag lenders, Kurt Covington, Ashley Arrington, Paul Neefer is the farmer CPA, as everybody knows. Matt Bennett will be there to help with grain marketing decisions. Basically, the Ag Finance Bootcamp is all about trying to boost your financial acumen, trying to learn how to manage the work that farmers are working through a lot of money these days. Inflation has taken its toll. Land prices are up, rents are up, costs are up. We have to help them try to manage their money, manage their working capital. And this day-long workshop is just designed to help talk about money issues. We're going to have a session with ag bankers there who can help talk about how to get the most out of your lender relationship. So that's what's going to be happening on the 19th.
That is certainly important as we prepare for a potential move up in interest rates. Keeping those lenders happy is vital. That's the 19th, Mike. Then the 20th and the 21st, the Business Summit gets underway. Who do you have presenting this year at the Business Summit?
We have a great lineup of speakers, I have to tell you. Dr. David Cole is going to be leading off the charge on the morning of the 20th. He'll be talking about the global supply and demand issues that we all face, as long as with the best practices that farmers need to adopt in order to make sure their businesses are thriving. We have several other speakers. Bobby Martins from Iowa State will be talking about supply chain issues. Our own Jackie Fatka, our policy editor from Farm Futures, will be talking about what kinds of threats he might be seeing from Washington, D.C. Our market analyst, Jacqueline Holland, will be talking about the rising fertilizer prices and when we might see a little break on that. We have other speakers, of course. Ed Ussett, who is University of Minnesota grain marketing expert, will be talking about different ways. It's a very interesting presentation, I have to tell you. He's going to be talking about the historic way that farmers sell their crops and what we can learn from how to do a better job going forward. Between all that, we also have some people teaching what I call soft people skills. Dean Hefta will be there talking about farm leadership and how to communicate on the farm. And he will also have a session about young farmers. One of the biggest challenges for young farmers is they want to climb up the responsibility ladder on the farm, but they don't have any financial control, or they have very little. And this is going to be a session just specifically for young farmers. So we have a lot on the plate. So I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody.
Absolutely. And a panel on carbon markets. Mike, it sounds like you will be addressing a lot of the issues that farmers are thinking about right now. If growers are interested, they want to come to Coralville on the 20th and the 21st of this year, where can they go to get more information?
Well, we'd love to see you there live and in person. Iowa is open for business. FarmFuturesSummit.com is the answer to all your issues in terms of registering for the events. We do have a virtual component if you're interested in that.
Perfect.
We'd love to see you there, and I look forward to seeing all of you.
All right, things to watch for. Mike Wilson, executive editor of Farm Futures Magazine. Well, the first trading week of 2022 saw some volatility in the agricultural markets, and to help us make sense of them this week is Joe Camp. He's the director of managed programs with Comstock Investments. Joe, thanks for talking to us this week.
Glad to join you, Mike. A couple of interesting weeks to start out the new year here for markets.
That's the truth. Let's look at this corn market first. We saw some pretty aggressive buying when the traders returned early in the week, and then it kind of faded. Joe, what's happening in the corn market right now?
We were watching that potential breakout because corn futures did rally above $6. That's psychological resistance, of course, and it was also a level where we had a lot of farmer offers stacked up. So some cash grain moved on the plug up above $6, and the board kept going. Well, now we've had a little bit of weakness here coming into the mid part of the week. We've got traders starting to position themselves for next week's crop report, take some risk off of the table. Ultimately, there is still going to be some concern for the corn market that we have to see exports pick up in a bigger way at the start of the year, or we're going to be lagging the USDA's current demand estimates. So a back and forth based off of supply being in tight hands for the most part, and base is still strong and leading the way, but then some worries about going forward if demand can be sustained, namely exports again, and with China.
Yeah, that is a concern. You mentioned that supply and demand report coming from USDA next Wednesday. Joe, on the corn side of the balance sheet, are you expecting any big changes to yield or acreage?
That's always a wild card. We did see in recent reports a bias for the USDA to lower production just slightly. That can come either on yield or harvested acres. Harvested acres could come down just slightly in a year like this. Maybe that leaves the better yields and yield stays steady or even inches up a little bit, but we're already starting at a record level, 177. So the bias could be just a little bit lower to maybe drop us just slightly under 15 billion bushels of production. So that's what we'll get the first glance next week is whether or not they do change supply. And then from there, it'll be what are they going to do to massage demand.
Well, and when you think about the demand picture looking ahead to 2022, Joe, ethanol seems to be firing on all cylinders. There are some concerns about exports. Where else do you think we might see some adjustments on the demand side?
It would be a result of South American changes for production over there. You named it, with ethanol likely to come up here. We should now wonder what will be the moving parts on exports. And again, it really matters what's happening in South America. Brazil, we know they've started out with great conditions and now turning dry, particularly in the south. So if that's a drought that continues to expand into the rest of January, February, we're going to start to question what their potential is for their safrinha, that second crop of corn that competes so heavily with U.S. exports. So if we do see the USDA express some concern about Brazilian production, we could see that be supportive for the export number that would ultimately be biased a little bit lower right now because we're not keeping up with a pace that would be necessary to meet the current export target.
Joe, on the wheat side, winter wheat seedings, looking ahead to this supply and demand report, do you expect to see any big changes?
Well, that's going to be interesting because of what we saw a couple of weeks ago in a risk management agency report that suggested winter wheat seedings could be a little bit lower than anticipated. We had expected that the acres would be up here after a couple of years of record low wheat seedings, and with higher prices to incentivize extra acres this year. But that, again, might not be the case here. Whether or not acres went idled or they're going to other crops, yet to be determined next week.
Things to keep an eye on when we return. Joe Camp will give us some more insight. We'll look at the bean market and also livestock, so stay with us on This Week in Agribusiness. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by AgriGold, your seed ally in the field, with unparalleled options that perform on your farm. Learn more at agrigold.com. And we're talking markets with Joe Camp from Comstock Investments. Joe, you mentioned in segment one the challenges that they are facing down in South America with this drought. As we look at the soybean market, that drought certainly caught some attention this week.
Yeah, we should start to see that show up in a more impactful way, and the balance sheet changes next week with the USDA likely to move a little bit lower on their current estimate for Brazil's soybean production. 144 metric tons is where it's starting. That was seen as an aggressively high point to begin, but they did rotate more acres into the mix this year, although now suffering from, as you allude to, this drought spreading in the south. Conditions pretty favorable in the north, the center west, like Mato Grosso, but there are some worries that the cloudy weather could even delay that crop, which was otherwise before recently scheduled to be online and ready for harvest right at the end of this current month. So what we're seeing now is some trend for the crop estimates to be lower based on the dry conditions, and that of course linked to La Nina, which is also keeping things dry and hot in the southern portions of that region, so Argentina as well.
Interesting. Joe, how should producers be planning ahead for this report next week? Any risk management advice as they look at what could be a volatile move here from the USDA?
We're using the recent strength here for nearby futures and the sustained strength and basis to move the needle on old crop sales. So recently, having pushed past the halfway mark on sales for both old crop corn and soybeans, and we're going to be selling incrementally up at levels like 620 corn futures, right up above $14 soybean futures. If we get back there again anytime soon, we'd be getting now towards about 75% sold. And at that time, I think we can move our focus towards, okay, do we start hedging the new crop here at levels that are also very good if we can lock in some profit around these levels, still above 550 new crop corn futures, above $13 November 22 soybeans.
Joe, one of the things we talk about a lot in the ag markets is money flow and how investment dollars move through the industry and can change our prices. Because of that, I wanted to ask you about the Federal Reserve's meeting minutes that came out on Wednesday. It seems like we changed the energy a little bit in the financial markets. What happened?
Yeah, those Fed minutes came out after the grain market was closed, and maybe that was a good thing because it put traders on edge yesterday afternoon, and we saw stock futures dip hard. They were affected by what was a more hawkish tone by the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, and the rest of the central bankers who are likely to now move up interest rates sooner than we had anticipated maybe a month or two ago, taking on a more aggressive stance because of what are still these worries about inflation. So that can come into the mix in a couple of ways here over the next few months. It's likely to still provide some support to the commodity market that we're worried about this inflation, and everybody wants to get in and get what they can to be prepared for the year ahead. But it also can be a negative if we do see interest rates continue to go higher. If the dollar strengthens up, we know that can be a negative for our export potential.
Certainly more competition out there in the world. Joe Camp, the Director of Managed Programs at Comstock Investments. Joe, thanks so much for talking to us this week.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
The first work week of the year is always the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, one of the largest trade shows in the country. It's all about technology, so our own Chad Colby had to go to see what was in store.
We've got a lot to talk about this week in the tech segment as I attended the CES show in Las Vegas. Yes, there were certainly a few less vendors and less people, but there was no shortage of great technology to talk about. You may recognize this logo, especially if you run Case IH equipment. This is the FPT Power Group. And look at this. They've got a hybrid marine propulsion system that's not conventional at all. Yes, it's got a diesel engine, but it uses a generator to store power in the batteries to run an hydrojet to move the boat. They also have, of course, batteries and electric drive systems as well. Speaking of propulsion, look at this prototype from a startup company. Look at this engine. This is still a gasoline-powered engine, has 15 horsepower. I think it was around 23 foot-pounds of torque. You can have more than one of these. It's the size of a big football. Pretty interesting when you look at it up close. Now, when we talk about the EV industry, electric vehicles, then you start going down that path of how do we charge them. Then we talk about solar and battery storage. This company was showcasing how you could also take power from the vehicle and put it back in your house. Now, Ford's new F-150 will do that as well. And speaking of this truck, which will debut at the dealerships here very soon this year, Ford announced they've doubled production of that vehicle to meet demand this year. Speaking of EV vehicles, at the CES show, I was blown away by the new companies, if you would, getting into this space like Sony. They had a couple vehicles here, but everywhere you look, there was another company I had never heard of with another vehicle. Now, the one thing I will tell you, they've certainly paid attention to the North American market, because a lot of these vehicles are designed here, of course, because they're listening. And I think you're going to find you're going to have a lot more options for electric vehicles than you would have in the past with a conventional vehicle. Now, if you remember in 2019 at Agritechnica, a lot of companies had prototypes of ag machinery with battery power. Bobcat unveiled their new skid loader. Pretty impressive machine. Basically no maintenance, 4-hour runtime. You'll see those at Sunbelt stores this year. And they also have an electric-powered excavator as well. There's just always so much to see. Look at this fully autonomous snowblower. And I was kind of expecting LG to have a big 95-inch or 105-inch TV, but their booth was all virtual. And if it wasn't enough, look at this. The Indy Autonomous Challenge, that's right, they had a competition with cars competing at the racetrack here in Las Vegas fully autonomously. As you can see, there was a lot to see at CES. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Boy, that Chad Colby gets all the rough assignments going to Las Vegas in January. Chad, thanks for sending that in. It will be very neat to see that technology become a part of our daily lives. We'll have more to come. Stay with us. Thanks for joining us here on This Week in Agribusiness. One of the top technology trends over the past several years has been autonomy. As labor shortages trouble everyone from farmers to truckers, companies are finding ways to make these objects work on their own. Chad Colby was at CES this past week, and he had a chance to learn what John Deere's moves have been in autonomy.
This past week at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, John Deere unveiled their new autonomous system for tractors. That's right, completely hands-free, can operate it from your smartphone. Now, I understand the nervousness about this new technology, and as I talked to the John Deere team and they explained the hardware to me, I wanted a little bit more of the insights, and I spoke with their Director of Emerging Technologies, Julian Sanchez, about honestly how we got to this point.
Key pivot points in the last 20 years of technology, and it's not just technology in agriculture, it's just technology as a whole. If I think back in the last 20 years, connectivity, the idea that going into 2010, everything started to be connected. That all of a sudden unlocked the power of the cloud, which came a few years later. Cloud computing is kind of limitless and allowed us to do a whole bunch more things. And in the last 5 years, the evolution of camera systems, as well as the software that runs those cameras, essentially the evolution of artificial intelligence, which frankly had been kind of dormant for 20 years, really unlocked the ability to do some new things. And that's what led to this. Connectivity, cloud, and artificial intelligence really gives you a realistic shot at autonomy.
So we all know about the challenges in agriculture. A lot of those challenges have been the same for generations and generations.
Yeah.
I'm not alone. I sat with my dad at the kitchen table. I remember the cell phone conversations where the first cell phone we got was $2,000. I remember the argument about why do we want to have yield monitors, let alone those conversations of we're never going to spend $20,000 for auto steer. That's a waste of money.
Yeah.
What do you talk to producers that are seeing this announcement this week from John Deere? Clearly, this isn't a prototype.
Right, it's
This
real.
will be in the field this fall. It's here.
Actually, and I'll speak from personal experience here. I do adopt technology, and I'm personally a technologist, but I'm also a skeptic. And so I actually think be skeptical and ask questions. With autonomy, and let me just give you some hints about what questions to ask, because I've been in this field quite a bit I've been trying to develop this system for 20 years, and it's finally here. So I've built up my own skepticism over the last 20 years. Ask yourself, so for example, for fall tillage, if you've got somebody that you've hired and they're in the cab of the tractor working fall tillage, you're overseeing harvesting operations. When you call that guy, what are you asking him, right? What are the things you want to know? And so think about that. And then when you go talk to your John Deere dealer about this system, say, hey, these are the things I want my guy to tell me. Can this thing do that for me? Hopefully we've thought of those. I think we have. But if we haven't, then we'll get to work on it. And so be skeptical, but give it a chance and ask questions about what it can and can't do.
And to think today we can run our tractors with our smartphones. And just a little added thought, those smartphones, the iPhone, was released 14 years ago this weekend. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. It will be interesting to watch growers put this technology into practice on their farms and free up a little more labor and a little more time. The iPhone came out 14 years ago, as Chad mentioned, and folks are finding new ways to use it each year. The state of North Dakota recently announced a way that landowners can post whether or not hunting is allowed on their property by going online and registering it. Al Gustin has the story from North Dakota.
It was the law in North Dakota for generations. If a landowner, farmer, or rancher wanted to keep hunters or other sportsmen off his land, he had to physically post that land, put up signs. That was the law until this year, when the North Dakota Stockmen's Association was successful in passing a new law that created an electronic posting mechanism.
What landowners are able to do is to post their land, open, closed. They can provide contact information if they'd like. That's up to them.
A lot of landowners aren't opposed to hunting, they just want to know who's out there. So you can still physically post. A lot of landowners still wanted to physically post, use physical signage. A lot of landowners want to leave lands unposted.
Game and Fish has put on their website a number of apps and tools that sportsmen can use to identify land posted electronically.
Zoom in and these different lands will show is posted here. So on any one of these lands,
Those that are crosshatched are posted.
the ones that are crosshatched are electronically posted.
And so in the field,
Right there.
There's some good quality deer down there.
Charlie Wittenberg is one of the hunters who has utilized the new electronic posting. He thinks it's okay.
Sometimes you found a corner post that was posted, but you didn't know if it was posted on this side or this side. At least you could look at the ownership and determine whose land you were on.
But not all sportsmen are comfortable with computers, cell phones, and apps. Cell phone service can be an issue.
But you can take pictures, like you can take a picture of it and freeze it and take it with you. I do that sometimes.
Hosick says Game and Fish has not received a lot of negative feedback from sportsmen. Ellingson says feedback from landowners has been positive. In the first year, 7,000 North Dakota landowners posted 3.75 million acres electronically. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Al Gustin.
Thank you, Al, for that story. It's impressive to see the uptake across the North Dakota landowners for that website only in its first year. Very interesting. North Dakota has certainly been cold. Greg Solier will join me later on in the program to see whether or not that cold sticks around.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. This show, we are talking a lot about technology and how it finds its way onto farmers' land. Well, one place we're finding more technology is in farm management software. I had the chance to check in with Sean Hoke, Syngenta's corn product herbicide lead here for the U.S. about AgriEdge, their farm management software.
AgriEdge is a great farm management software, but it's more than that. It's actually a program that we offer to our valued customers with and through our channel partners. And it enables really good conversations to occur with a farmer and their trusted advisor. And not just a conversation about agronomics, but a conversation that connects agronomics to economics and really challenges each other in that conversation to focus on return on investment or profit-based decision making versus purely just agronomic or purely just yield. There's a profit component in there, and that's what most farmers are farming towards. The other nice thing about this program that I found is it allows a generational conversation to happen. So there's a lot of farmers in their 30s, 50s, 70s. My dad farms, he's in his 70s. It allows that business knowledge to be transitioned from one generation to the other. And let's be honest, millennials have a penchant for technology, and they grab hold of that and can utilize this technology to learn more about the business and make transition planning more successful.
Have you seen more usage of the AgriEdge platform over the past year?
Yeah, so we've had AgriEdge for at least 15, 20 years. It's came out of the south and eastern part of the United States and moved through the Midwest, and it's grown quite rapidly. And we have a lot of success with this program, and it's amazing what just trying to help farmers make data-driven decisions, not better decisions, but in some cases they're already making really good decisions, might be helping them to validate those decisions and be more comfortable with what they made.
Validate the decisions and show to other trusted partners what you're doing on the farm and have the numbers to back it up. Certainly sounds like it's going to be worth more as time goes on.
Yeah, I think what is constant is change, and what we understand with AgriEdge and our herbicide portfolio as well is that we need to be ready to adapt, and we need to be ready to look at what we've done, but also look forward and understand what's changed in that last year. And this program allows you to sit down, review what you did last year, put the new numbers in. You may need to make a change, or you may need to double down on what you've been doing because it's worked, and you can feel comfortable knowing that.
Thank you, Sean. If you can measure it, you can change it. Great words of advice from Sean Hoke there, Syngenta's lead for corn herbicides in the U.S.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, the weather picture has gotten exciting for a lot of folks watching the program this weekend. Greg Solier joins me. Greg, things are getting more active. Do they stay that way this week in the Pacific Northwest?
Things have quieted down, and actually we've had several rounds of meaningful moisture. And as they say in the livestock sector, the other boot and or hoof has dropped, especially across the plains and points out of the east with snow and cold. This week things do kind of quiet down a bit. Here's a bitter feel where readings have been down around 25, 35, almost 40 degrees below zero actual air temperatures across Big Sky and the Canadian Prairie, but the cold will moderate here as the week wears on. There's a weak system coming ashore in the Pacific Northwest. We've seen at least a modest categorical improvement to the drought pattern in the Northwest, and of course runoff and flooding, debris flow flooding because of significant moisture in the Pacific Northwest during December. This week, though, a weak system comes ashore, a stray shower mid to late portion of the week, gusty winds downslope, and temperatures recover, and some snow melt gets going into the northern plains. The cold air as well begins to abate across the Canadian Prairie. So a pretty quiet spell of weather here into the Pacific Northwest for this week. Had some interesting weather, significant moisture, double-digit rainfall totals for the month of December into northern California, several feet through the Sierra, now 100 to 150, 170% of normal precip into that part of the country. Hopefully that means a meaningful runoff, not necessarily early though. The cold air, central and southern plain states, and absence of any major winter storms into the Pacific West and southern plains for this week. We get a warm front to take hold, a change in the steering currents west to east, so moderating temperatures in the desert southwest, maybe a stray shower in northern California, and a warm up at least into thaw-free cycles for the plain states, some shower activity down to central and south Texas.
Well, I know some folks in the central part of the U.S. would like a warm up, Greg. They got dropped into the deep freeze this week. Does that stick around?
Yeah, we'll get at least not necessarily the deep freeze. We'll start the week off that way with readings that, again, over the past couple of weeks have stayed below below zero during the daytime and down 25, 30, 35, 40 degrees below zero north of the border at night. So that's the main mother lode here. A little clipper system, a dash of snow, and significant snow cover for a change. It was lacking during much of December into the Plain States and Corn Belt. That has since changed. We get thaw-free cycles, a warm-up, at least a better feel. Outdoor endeavors, some sloppy footing here across the plains, and snow melt expected across sections of the northern and eastern Corn Belt with a warm front on the move and a nice break in the cold, especially from the Mississippi on westward here the second half of the week. Into the southern plains we go, and significant moisture in the form of perhaps a few wet snowflakes. Eastern Texas, Bayou country, and north from there with cold air and moves on in, and a cold front, nice shower and thunderstorm activity across the Gulf Coast area later in the week. Nice recovery on temperatures with the start of a wetter cycle into the at least the Rio Grande Valley. Gulf Coast area is pretty quiet, high pressure into the southwestern sections of the country.
Looking further east, Greg, Mid-Atlantic got some snow this last week. Do things settle down over there? On the
Positive side of that, that's an area that's been in the midst of a significant dry and drought-ridden spell. But again, they've had two of these systems that come on through, and there's cold air in sight. Cold front of the move across the northeast of New England. The bitter cold, the lake snows, the feel and look of January wintertime through the Great Lakes region. Into the western Corn Belt, Mississippi Valley and points southeast. A nice recovery on temperatures, a quiet weather picture. Dash of snow up towards the Sioux late in the week with some winter sunshine for the northeast of New England. Again, more moisture in some of this drought area of the southern mid-Atlantic region, including more snow perhaps early in the week, especially higher elevations, showers and thunderstorms down across Florida. That front will move on through with frost and freeze potential. High pressure and control across sections of the mid-Atlantic region with a recovery on temperatures delta and the start of some wet weather back into play over central and south Texas.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
That cold snap this last week certainly caught me by surprise. Greg, one of the upsides is we didn't get a lot of precipitation with it in the northern Corn Belt. As you look out over this next week, who is going to get the precip?
It looks to be primarily the Great Lakes region, sections of the northeast New England, and most of this is really going to be from a clipper system, some lake snows, and for a change, significant snow on the ground, of which will be kind of melting away, thaw-free cycles into this particular corridor, but little to none over the southwest, Great Plains into the Ohio Valley, the start of a wetter trend and through Texas, the Gulf Coast area and southeast. This is good news in this part of the country. Not necessarily the return of maybe some wet snow. Again, most of the organized light snow in this particular area, and half to 1 inch in the Pacific Northwest anticipated. Again, that December precip in California, central and southern areas, a bit of an anomaly. Back into a more typical La Nina setup here for this week.
Greg, looking at next week, January 17th, what sort of temperature swings do you expect to see across the country?
Well, that trend towards a thaw, if you will, is underway in the western Corn Belt, begins to build back into the northern plains and east from there. Thaw-free cycles, and sometimes things do get complicated with temperatures, with snow melt and putting that moisture back in the atmosphere. Watch for some freezing drizzle, perhaps some frosty areas too. Warmth across California, the Pacific Northwest, a little cooler than average with clouds and moisture. Gulf Coast area, normal for the mid-Atlantic region, and a slight chill in the air for the northeast and New England. Where the storm track is basically poised with some upslope conditions for parts of Montana, the northern high plains, but basically pretty quiet weather pattern across much of the heartland. Moisture is of benefit here in this part of the country. Wet weather through Texas, the Gulf Coast area, and at least a normal precip pattern for central and southern California in relation to mid to late January, as well as into the Pacific Northwest.
As January comes to a close, do you expect to see more above normal temps?
For perhaps a lingering several day span, we see its expansion here into the eastern Corn Belt. So a nice break on what's been so far relatively short feel of winter time. So again, watch for some footing issues, those bin and barn walls and all that with warmth and melting snow cover and high humidity. But a better feel here, warmth down through the Gulf Coast area. Note how the jet stream begins to swing in from southwest to northeast with some cooling across the western states, where there will be some good news. More moisture for northern and central California, Pacific Northwest, and a pretty active weather pattern. And usually with that warmth per se, it could be a mixed bag of moisture from the Great Lakes and Corn Belt locales down through Texas, back into a short-term dry spell for the eastern states and the southeast as well.
Now let's look at that first week of February. Greg, what is in store for us then?
We'll see if I see my shadow or not. We'll see what that critter has to say. There are folks who like to watch that thing. But in any event, this is a science, and we see a big pattern shift. That wet weather and snowier and icier weather pattern off with replacements of cold air. And this particular jet stream orientation, the warmth into the southwest areas of the Rio Grande down through Texas. And look at this range of temperatures. You know we get that going. And we know we get a storm track that's pretty active as well. Stormy Pacific Northwest into the northern Rockies across much of the Corn Belt locales. Looks like a series of winter storms on the move and significant moisture here. Plan accordingly. Dry weather continues on, by the way, West Texas into central and southern California, too.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
In Max's Tractor Shed this weekend, it's a Massey Ferguson from Nebraska, purchased 54 years ago. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store-Lock Tool Cabinets. If you resolved as this new year began to get your shop ship shape, here's how you start. You plop down a Store-Lock tool cabinet in there. Maybe you add another one or two. And then you'll know where your parts, where your nuts and bolts and washers and tools are. Store-Lock tool cabinets, by the way, they are guaranteed for 55 years. I'll explain that another week. Go to their website, storelock.com. It was 1967 when Verley Lush in southern Nebraska bought a brand new Massey Ferguson. And he used that on the cattle farm there to feed the cattle. Oh, when he bought it, he got a 21-foot Massey Ferguson disc with it. The two combined, $7,500. Verley used that as his main tractor there over the years, along with his sons Gail and Ron and John. And then about 9 years ago, John restored that tractor. Alex Lush has it today. Oh yeah, with an AM radio? Yeah, it's right there to bring in the farm report, the ball game, the oldies the way they were meant to be heard. Alex Lush's Massey Ferguson, made 54 years ago in Wilcox, Nebraska, just a little bit north of the Kansas state line.
Well, Max, I'd like to take this opportunity to review what we've learned from the second half of 2021 with the availability of equipment and the prices that shot through the roof. Back in August, we sold a 2020 John Deere S790 combine for $401,000 that was located in Ray, North Dakota. We sold a 2016 Heggie STS 16 120-foot self-propelled sprayer located in Whitmore, Iowa for $341,250. A 2019 Case IH 7250 combine located in Riverton, Illinois sells for $320,250. That beat the old record price of that make and model by over $15,000, despite this machine having double the hours of the previous high price. A 2008 Peterbilt 384 day cab semi-truck tractor located in Belvedere, Nebraska sells for a whopping $70,000. That was $40,000 over any comparable on record by any auction provider. A 2020 Tempty Super Hopper 50-foot tandem axle grain trailer sells for $16,000 more than any sale of record. Well, Max, a lot of farmers have deferred their income from 2021 into 2022, so we are still anticipating a very active spring market on good quality used equipment. Go to bigiron.com for all of our contact information.
We love to highlight the next leaders of agriculture, and you can find those folks in FFA. Joining us this week is South Dakota State FFA President Tessa Erdman. Tessa, what was it that got you involved in FFA in the first place?
You know, FFA has been in my family for as long as I could remember, but really what drew me in was being able to show another time at the fair. And then after that, I had the opportunity to start doing all the events, being involved inside my chapter, and just the involvement and getting all the leadership opportunities drew me in and kept me in and made me get more involved, which is the best part about it all.
It certainly is, and your involvement grew and grew. Last April, you were elected president of the South Dakota FFA. Tessa, looking out over this next year, what events are you excited for?
you know, as every state officer is, convention is coming up and it's just around the corner. I know South Dakota, we had our convention in person again last year. So just doing it again this year is super exciting, and that's something I'm looking forward to.
And in FFA, you had the chance to start a goat herd. Tessa, how many goats are you up to?
I am up to 39 in my project, and it's growing absolutely every year, and I have FFA to thank for that.
That's fantastic. And you're currently a freshman at South Dakota State University. Tessa, what are you studying?
I'm currently studying ag business and ag communications with an ag marketing minor.
Love it. Plan to stay in the agriculture industry, it sounds like?
Yes, most definitely. Agriculture runs deep in my roots. I'm a fourth-generation farmer on my farm, so I will know that agriculture is a big passion of mine, and that's where I want to grow in.
Fantastic. Well, we wish you the best of luck. Tessa Erdman, the South Dakota State FFA president for 2021 and 2022.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
Let me begin my first Samuelson Says for the new year by wishing you a happy new year, but more importantly, wishing you a healthy new year. And during the holiday season, I know that many of you were making plans for the new year as far as your agricultural crops. So I'm going to repeat something I've said several times in the past year. Number one, the headlines that I continue to get tell me that prices for ingredients are going up. And I continually get warnings that there could be shortages and you may not be able to get the ingredients you need on time. So I repeat something you've heard me say several times: order early. And then we delayed our travels to Arizona headquarters by a full year because of the epidemic. And so I repeat, Gloria and I have our vaccinations, and I hope you have the vaccinations that are necessary to keep you and the people around you safe. But again, I come back to order early. Prices probably aren't going to get any lower, but they probably will get higher, and make sure you don't get affected by shortages and delivery problems getting the products to your farm. So again, thank you for being a part of Samuelson Says. Thank you for being a part of This Week in Agribusiness, and I wish you the very best, but especially good health for the new year. So be safe, be well. My thoughts on Samuelson Says.
One of the topics I hear about more and more from growers and from advertisers in the agriculture space is carbon markets, carbon sequestration, managing carbon on your farms. It's a topic that's probably not going to go away. I had the chance to talk with Anastasia Pavlovic. She's from Agoro Carbon Alliance, and they're one of the newer names in this space.
We launched June 2021, very exciting year for us. Owned and started by Yara International, which is a large fertilizer producer headquartered in Norway, been around for over 100 years.
Why did they want to move into the carbon space?
Yara had done a lot of big investments into the green ammonia spaces, particularly in the industrial businesses. Everything we ship across the world for fertilizers uses a lot of fuel, and there's a lot of investment to be done there on the production side. And there was this question about on-field emissions and what are we doing to help support at the farm gate to help reduce the emissions that are happening on farm and really support farmers to help these practices, because they're hard to do.
They are hard to do. Yeah. So Agoro Climate Alliance, you came up with a set of practices and now you're trying to get growers to sign up.
Absolutely.
And so let's talk about what some of those practices are. What should farmers be doing, or what can they earn money by doing through Agoro Carbon?
Changes to tillage are a big one, depending on where you are in the US, and it can be very regionally specific. There are places where people are doing lots of no-till already, but there are also pockets where it's not as common and it's harder to implement. So tillage changes are a big one, all the way down to zero till. Cover crops is another big one. Again, there are people who have done it for 20 years, and there are people who have never tried it, working through that spectrum to kind of like understand how the changes go. Nitrogen management is another big one, really optimizing using the 4 R's and thinking about what changes you can make to make your precision fertilizer kind of happen in a better way. So that's another big one. So yeah, looking forward to more. A lot has happened in the last 2 years. So a lot of confusion, I think, overall. And so a lot of farmers and retailers and other partners trying to find their way, and I think our role is to help explain in these early days of a growing and developing market what's true, what it means, what it looks like to participate, a lot of education and awareness. But I think the feedback has been really strong. I think, also people tend to sometimes not know and maybe disqualify themselves thinking, I've done some of these things for a long time, that means maybe I can't participate. And I encourage everyone to just like really understand more about what they can do, because there's a lot of different options, and our job is to find something for everyone, right?
Thank you, Anastasia, for filling us in on Agoro. This carbon buzzword is not going to go away. If you're curious about it and how it might work in your operation, and you're planning on coming to the Farm Futures Business Summit, there's going to be a panel addressing carbon. Get registered. Go to farmfuturessummit.com with 2 S's. Thanks for tuning in to us this week. Join us next week, same time, same place, right here for This Week in Agribusiness.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by OMAX Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.